Hello, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to ZTV. Tonight is our bi-weekly reading, writing, and Ralph. I am hoping everyone has enjoyed the weather today. It has cooled down a little bit. Let's hope it stays that way. So before we get into tonight's episode, I want to, first of all, thank our sponsors, the Kathleen and Eddie Arthur Hearts of Love Fund. This is a community assistance fund that was started by Ed Arthur in 2019 in honor of his parents. They have been doing some amazing things for the community. I can't wait to share with you guys what they have going on. They are working on something big, and there will be a story about it in the future. So I want to welcome Ralph to tell us a little bit about tonight's author, Rebecca Greene, who will help us explore Virginia. Hi, Ralph. How are you?
Hey, Grace, I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I am good. I'm glad to be here. I am glad to be here tonight because we're going to be virtually touring Virginia in a sense with tonight's author. Give us a little bit of a brief introduction.
Well, first, I want to thank the Eddie and the Author Foundation. They're doing a marvelous job, and I can't wait to hear the good news about what's in their future plans.
Yeah,
Rebecca Greene is this is Exploring Virginia is her second book. Her first book was My Perfect Cupcake, and she gives a whole different take on how to travel with children. And as I was telling my friends about her book, I said, "Yeah, it's far removed from 'Are we there yet? Are we there yet?'" I remember those days traveling with my children, and when I traveled with my parents. So it's a very different take. She's done a wonderful job, and I always enjoy hearing what's in the minds of the children's authors.
Yeah, I think it's a lovely perspective, and it's one we don't get often on this show. So I am excited for tonight. We have trivia as per usual. Trivia,
Yes.
everyone, you may use Google. So be the first to answer correctly, and you will get a free copy of tonight's author's book. So with that in mind, Ralph, I will let you and Rebecca take it away.
Hi, Rebecca.
Hi,
How are
Ralph.
you?
Thank you. I'm good. Thank you so much for having me tonight.
Well, thanks for coming on and sharing this time with myself and the audience. Um, it's always good to have a fresh young face, and particularly children's authors. We don't get a lot, so they're unique, and we've got a lot of, as we get older, a lot of friends and relatives who are parents, grandparents, uncles, cousins, nieces, and nephews that have young children bouncing around. So it's always good to have a perspective on how children's authors are approaching problems today. So before we get started, let me remind the audience we'll have two trivia questions. First person in with the correct answer, type it in the comments section, and you can use Google to look up the answers. We don't care. And we'll get an autographed copy of Explore Virginia with me. So Rebecca, tell the viewers about yourself, who you are, your background.
Okay, great. Well, I am by day a therapist, a mental health therapist in group practice. I work with kids, teens, and adults. And the typical issues I work with for kids and teens are stress, anxiety, depression, school problems, social skills problems. So really a variety of different issues. And then at night, I'm a children's book author and also a self-help author. But right now I'm focusing on my children's books. I have 3 published children's books. 2 of them focus on social emotional skills. And then this book, Explore Virginia with Me, focuses on exploring the world around us.
Wow.
And I'm actually envisioning Explore Virginia with Me as a series in the Mid-Atlantic, a series of children's books focused on different Mid-Atlantic states and exploring each one. So the next one I have in mind is Explore Maryland with Me.
Great. That's a terrific idea. But let me double back to your daytime profession for a second. And you brought up some pretty tragic words um, when it comes to youth: depression, social skills, anxiety, stress. Um, when I grew up, I came out of an era where, particularly the young men, as we went through junior high school and into high school, we were facing graduation and the prospects of being marched off to war. Yet, I don't remember anyone that I was remotely connected to having talked about or expressing any of those concerns, either to their peer group or their parents, or from their parents to my parents or other parents. So, what's changed? Why is all of that pent up angst so pressure packed in teens today?
I think a big part of it, Ralph, is social media. And, with so many teens getting cell phones at a very young age, the average age for kids these days getting a cell phone is around 10 or 11. Teens are exposed to social media for many years, before they reach high school. And I think that when they're on the different sites that they use, especially Snapchat and Instagram, and they're seeing all of these curated lifestyles of their peers and celebrities, they can feel judged, and it can make them feel bad about themselves. And that can really lead to a significant anxiety and depression. And with teens also preferring to text their friends or being on Snapchat rather than calling or being in person, I think there's also a pretty big social skills deficit that starts to build over the years, because kids aren't interacting, face to face in person or on the phone as much as they used to in previous generations. And a lot of kids and teens are growing up without that firm foundation of social skills that used to come from kids having more free time to play in the backyard or the neighborhood with other kids, just more of a free range childhood. These days, most of them are basically on screens most of the time. After school, they're texting their friends, they're playing video games, they're on social media. So they're interacting in a different way. And, from what I've seen, this can be a big contributor to a lot of the depression and anxiety we're seeing in great numbers with kids and teens today.
So, how do you get preteens and teens on the road to, and even society on the road to correcting this, if there is a correction, or getting teens, more centered and more balanced with more social skills?
Well, I think a big factor in that would be parents regulating screen time and social media use more closely. So when teens, get their cell phones really young and then have unfettered access to social media 24/7, I think that's part of where the problem starts to form. So what parents can do is they can put limits on screen time. They can say, you can get your 30 minutes of screen time a day or whatever they decide is appropriate after you've played outside, played with friends, done your homework, done chores around the house, gotten some physical exercise in. And then, you can have 30 minutes or whatever of screen time. But, many parents these days don't put limits on screen time. And when teens spend most of their free time after school on screens, I think that's a big factor of what leads to these social skills deficits over time.
Let me ask one more question in this area. Might lead to two, but let me start with one. One of the terms that gets tossed around a lot is cyberbullying. And we faced schoolyard bullying. So there was always a schoolyard bully or two, and then there were always the rest of us. So if you had to juxtapose those, does the cyberbullying seem to last a lot longer from a mental perspective than the schoolyard bullying, or they equate over the long haul?
Well, I think one of the problems that makes cyberbullying worse for teens is that it's more widely visible. Because if someone posts a bullying comment on a teen's social media page, other people can see that. And until they delete that, it's there, and it can be, people can take screenshots of it and send it around a class or a school, and it can kind of, just spread virally like that. Whereas what you're describing seems like it would be more small scale, between a bully and the bully's victim in a small group on a schoolyard. And then when that's over, it's over. But with social media, things can linger, until they're deleted. And by then the damage can be done. So I think that's part of why cyberbullying is so dangerous. And also, it can just be more toxic in many ways. It can be more subtle sometimes. It can be more insidious. It can really pin friends against friends, and it's a huge problem with teens today.
Yeah, I think the point that you just raised about lingering is very true. Because in the schoolyard, when it was over, it was over. It was done. And now the digital footprint just never goes away.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I'm going to give the audience our first trivia question, and then I'm going to ask you how you started and why you started writing children's books. So everyone, the first trivia question of the night is, in what area of Virginia's portion of the Delmarva is home to a very unique museum? So what area of Virginia's section of the Delmarva Peninsula is home to a unique museum? So, Rebecca, how did you get into, and what drove you to get into writing children's books?
Well, I have a young son, and so for many years, from when he was a baby, toddler, I would read a lot of children's books to him. And over the years, I probably read hundreds of different children's books, ones we purchased, ones from the library. So I became very familiar with the genre. And over time, I noticed some gaps on the bookshelf, so to speak, that I felt could be filled with some new and exciting children's books that didn't seem to exist. So for my first children's book, My Perfect Cupcake, when my son was diagnosed with his first food allergy as a toddler, I looked for children's books, picture books, that would explain what having a food allergy is like in a way that a young child, toddler, preschooler age could understand. And I found very few books out there on the topic of food allergies. So I was thinking, gosh, this seems like a really big gap on the bookshelf. There's so many kids with food allergies. The most recent statistic is 1 in 13 children has a food allergy. So I was just questioning, why aren't there more books on this topic? So I decided when the pandemic first started, I took a leave of absence from my job at the time, since my son's public school was closed for a year. And I decided that year I would write this book that I had in mind for so long. So I wrote and published My Perfect Cupcake. And it has been an incredible journey. And then after that book, I decided, I was then, after my son was a little older in early elementary school, I was looking for some Virginia history and state fact books, because he was starting to get into Virginia history and I wanted to teach him all about our wonderful state. And I also found that there were very few books that were, there were several picture books on the topic, but there wasn't anything that was for an older age range that I could find. So last summer, I came up with a storyline for my book, Explore Virginia with Me. And I came up with a storyline about a young girl whose family just moves to Virginia. And they take a summer road trip around the state, and they visit the top 10 kid-friendly sites, and they learn state history and facts along the way. So I weave the facts and the history into the story.
Yeah, this
and I came up with a fun storyline, and it just seemed to work. And that book was published in January.
Right. So tell now the heroine of this book is Julia, the little girl. how did you come up with her personality? If I beckon back to my days with my children, or even my days as a child, um, I, we, they were no piece of cake, and I was no piece of cake, packing my stuff and getting into the car. But Julia is completely different. So describe her to the audience.
Well, when I was creating her character, I was envisioning a spunky girl who just finished first grade. And, being new to the area, she wants to learn about her new state. She doesn't know too much about it. So when her parents say she's going on a road trip around the state for her summer vacation, she's really excited. She's bringing along her dog. She's packing her bag with a magnifying glass and binoculars and a guidebook and maps. And she's just ready to see everything she can in the state and learn all about history and facts along the way. So, she's not saying, are we there yet? When is this road trip over? She's excited to get to each destination. And her parents, make each one a surprise. So she doesn't know where she's going until they announce right before they get there. And the parents sing some songs along the way to, help them get to their next destination. And it's just a really fun time with this road trip that I was envisioning. So that's the basic storyline. And one kind of subtle surprise in the book that I don't know how many readers will actually catch is that Julia's dog is actually the state dog of Virginia. So I wanted to include that detail in the book, but I didn't explicitly state that her dog is the state dog. But I had the illustrator draw the American Foxhound, which is the state dog of Virginia, and he's in almost every page. So some readers who have an eagle eye may, pick up that that is the state dog of Virginia, but it's not specifically written in the book. But in the discussion questions at the end of the book, that is one of the discussion questions that I mentioned about. I ask readers, what is the state dog of Virginia?
Yeah, I saw that question, but I didn't connect it to the dog. I guess I didn't catch it. But Julia's a character, and you mentioned everything she packed, but there was one thing that you didn't mention, and that was her sketch pad. Mm-hmm. And why was that important to her?
Well, in some of the sites that she visits, she starts to draw some of them. And I think that's a really great way for kids to learn. Some kids learn better by, visually. Some kids learn better with auditory listening. And some kids learn better by doing something or drawing or art. So I wanted to include that aspect in the book. So she brings along her sketchbook. And at some of the sites, she's actually drawing what she sees, like at the Natural Bridge is one example. She's sitting there and she's drawing this magnificent bridge. And, when I was researching this book, I actually went to every single site in the book and I took my own photos and I, just kind of absorbed the energy of each place to decide whether or not it was a good fit for the book. And some of the places I had been to before, but some were entirely new. So for instance, I had never been to Virginia Beach before I did my research trip for this book. So I went to Virginia Beach and I was looking around and I had heard about the amazing statue on the boardwalk, which I had never seen before. And when I went to see it in person, it was just so big and magnificent, and the details and the bronze work were incredible. So I included it with some information in the book because I just thought this is a wonderful site for kids. And my son loved the statue and it was just absolutely amazing. So the statue made it into the book.
Yeah. And how tall is that statue?
Let me just double check. I want to make sure I'm telling you the right information. 34 feet tall.
Yeah, it's quite the sight. I've actually seen that statue. It's quite the sight. So what do you attribute in the family dynamic there that prevented Julia from saying that famous 4-word sentence, "Are we there yet?"
Well, I think she's got some very involved and engaged parents who, worked really hard to make this trip fun. They're taking her to places that are kid friendly. So she's going to be, most likely interested in all of them. And they're keeping her engaged along the way on the road. So in one of the pages, her mom is pointing out that she sees a red cardinal bird outside, the state bird of Virginia. So she's pointing that out, and the main character is really excited about that. And, when it's getting really hot, her father's saying, we're going to go check out a beach. And it turns out to be the biggest beach in Virginia Beach. So their parents are keeping her entertained along the way. She's only finished first grade. So they're, trying to engage her and get her excited about this family vacation. And, there's never a dull moment for her to, kind of be bored or say, are we there yet?
Yeah, they seem to be very engaged with her. So, what are some of the subtle and not so subtle messages that the adult reader should take away from the book?
I think that, Virginia is a very diverse state. One of the things when I was researching this book that really stood out to me is that the landscapes are so diverse. You've got mountains, countryside, big cities, small cities, beaches, coastal areas, forests. There's just, it's very diverse. And I think that's an amazing quality of the state of Virginia, and something I didn't realize, right away until I started researching the book. So I tried to include, as much of that diversity as I could. So she goes to the beach, she goes to the mountains, she goes to small towns, big cities. She also visits 2 sites in Northern Virginia. And that was really tough to decide on those 2 sites because a picture book is only 32 pages. Right. So I don't have that much room to explore, write about 30 different sites. So when it came to her returning home to Northern Virginia, I really could only choose 2. So the 2 I chose were Old Town Alexandria, because I just think that's just such a wonderful area to explore. And then the second one I chose was Meadowlark Botanical Gardens, because Meadowlark is my personal favorite spot in Northern Virginia. I love going there. I love the tranquility, the beautiful flowers, just the nature aspect. So because that's my personal favorite spot in Northern Virginia, I included that in the book. And I just think it's a wonderful park to visit.
It is. I've been there. It's a wonderful place. Anyway, we have a winner. Grace?
Yes. So the answer was Chincoteague, and the winner was John Gorski.
Congratulations, John. I'm going to ask the second trivia question so we leave the viewers with enough time in case they have trouble with this one. So the second question is, what are the most famous words spoken in St. John's Church in Richmond, Virginia? What are the most famous words spoken St. John's Church in Richmond, Virginia? So Rebecca, you mentioned Meadowlark Gardens. What is your other most favorite place that wasn't in Northern Virginia?
That wasn't, that's a tough one. I really loved Colonial Williamsburg. So I went to Colonial Williamsburg for the first time about 10 years ago. And then the second time was during my book's research trip. So I got to see it with fresh eyes and also with my son, who's very interested in history. So just walking down the historical streets and seeing all of the interesting, different storefronts with the interpreters and costume. I just think Colonial Williamsburg is so unique, and the historic Triangle area is incredible. I visited Jamestown on my research trip for the first time. That was incredibly interesting. And Yorktown, there's just so much history and so many interesting things to do in that historic Triangle area. So I'm really excited about going back there at some point soon and exploring more of that area.
Wow. And what would you consider the most eye-popping or eye-catching place that you visited other than Meadowlark Gardens?
I think, I was really, I think Natural Bridge is really incredible. It's this incredibly huge bridge made out of limestone, and, cars can drive on the top. And I had read, and I included in the book, there's some folklore about that when George Washington surveyed the area of Natural Bridge in 1750, he carved his initials in the rock 23 feet up off the ground. There's a GW in the rock. And so it's said that that was his initials. That's the folklore about that. But I just think Natural Bridge is just an incredible natural wonder. And I was just really in awe of it. It's just amazing, the size and just the fact that it's made out of, it's a natural bridge made out of stone. I think that's really incredible.
And what about the Luray Caverns?
Luray Caverns is, that also, I mean, one of the concepts I explain in the book is the concepts of stalactites and stalagmites. Mm-hmm. And there's a difference between the two. But when you go into Luray Caverns and it's dark and your eyes adjust and you see these incredible stone icicle-like things hanging down. I mean, it's and the ponds or the lakes, the ponds in there, the water bodies, it's otherworldly and absolutely amazing. So I would also say that Luray Caverns, which I thought was incredible and included in the book, is another just, it's just an amazing site in the state. And we're lucky that we have so many amazing sites to see, on a road trip. You could spend weeks, months even road tripping around the state and not see everything. So it was very difficult to narrow it down to 10 sites that I felt were the most kid-friendly around the state.
And as a graduating or rising second grader, I guess she would have been, how did she react to seeing that?
Oh, she thought that all of them were incredible. I think one of the ones that the main character liked the best is Shenandoah National Park, climbing to the top of one of the mountains and just looking at the landscape and the mountains in the distance, and just being in awe of the natural beauty there.
Wow. Now, give the viewers one or two things, in addition to what you may have already said, about Virginia that they might not already know.
I think the natural bridge, like I mentioned, that is a very interesting fact that, it's very curious because you see the GW on there and you're just wondering, who carved that? But the folklore being that was George Washington when he was surveying the land in 1750. I think that's really interesting. And also I just think, Virginia just has so many sites that are, I think very diverse. And if you want to teach your kids all about, different cities and mountains and beaches, I think that doing a road trip around Virginia, you can just learn many different things and see all different types of landscapes.
So if you had to give the adult readers of this a couple of takeaways when it comes to making the most out of a family road trip, what would those be?
I think planning, involving your child in the planning would be helpful, if the child is older and able to participate, because you want to make it fun for your kids. So getting their input into what they'd like to see best based on their interests, that could be helpful. So if your child is really interested in history, including Colonial Williamsburg on your itinerary would be a great, step to take. And also just kind of, one great place to look for ideas is TripAdvisor, and looking at the state of Virginia. What are the top, 20 sites? And then deciding, would my kids like that? Or is that something maybe to save until they're older? And there's just many ways to research a trip. But I think putting together an itinerary based on the amount of time you have, that's a good way to do it. In the book, it's not specifically stated how long their road trip was, but in my mind, I was imagining it to be about 3 weeks in order to cover all of this territory and crisscross around the state, and to see all of these 10 sites without rushing. I figured would take about 3 weeks. So just think about how much time you have, how many sites you can fit in based on where you're going, and including your kids in the planning process if you can. All make for a successful road trip.
Wow. Interesting stuff. Interesting stuff. The now you mentioned earlier you've got a new book coming out. Why don't you tell us about that? But hold your thoughts. We have a winner. Grace?
Yes. So the correct answer was Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death, and Bridget Brown got the answer correct.
Fabulous. Congratulations, Bridget. Yeah, so tell us about the new book, how it's changing or evolving from the first book and where you're taking things.
Sure. So, as a therapist, I am focusing my writing career for children's books mainly on social emotional skills and overcoming challenges. And Explore Virginia with Me is about exploring the world around us. But my third book, which just was published a few days ago, it's called Creating Kindness. And it's a social emotional skills book that teaches kids the importance of small acts of kindness and how those small acts of kindness can make a huge difference. So this is a very cute story with beautifully illustrated characters about a hedgehog and an owl who their neighbors find out some disappointing news about their community, and so they decide to turn things around by decorating and painting rocks with messages of kindness and placing them around their community. And when they do that, something really amazing happens that brings a community together. So the book focuses on the messages of the importance of kindness, how kids can, do kind gestures that really can make a big difference, and also the importance of building community and showing kindness to neighbors. So all of those different themes are in the book. And the book was just published a few days ago. It's available on Amazon in paperback and ebook. And I'm really excited to, start bringing that book to the world. And I have a lot of author visits scheduled already for that book for the next school year. So I'm really excited. And at the back of that book, there's a craft project about how kids can decorate their own rocks with messages of, inspiring messages, kind words, and how they can decorate those, and where they can place those, like on hiking trails or park benches or in community parks. And then the book also has some discussion questions at the end focused on kindness as well.
Well, I think adults could probably use that and place it around in their own communities.
Mm-hmm.
But let me ask you this: give us a little peek under the tent, and one or two messages that might be on a rock.
Well, when the pandemic first started and everything was locked down for 3 months and there wasn't much to do, my son and I spent a lot of time at parks and hiking, and we would find, these beautifully painted and decorated rocks with these inspiring messages on them. And that time was so bleak that these rocks were just the ray of sunshine in my day. And pretty much every time we would go on these hiking trails, we would find these rocks. And I was so inspired by the experience that led me to write this story. And, I think one of the messages is just even the smallest act of kindness, like, painting a rock with the word "keep going" on it in a bright color and putting it at the edge of a hiking trail or on a park bench. And then when someone finds that, it's just instantly brightens their day and brings them joy. And it's such a small gesture, but it can mean so much. And during that bleak time, the first couple months of the pandemic, when we would find these rocks, it was just like the highlight of our week. And that feeling has stayed with me. And it really led me to be inspired to write this book.
Now, I want to circle back to where we started the conversation. So, as you shift gears here, and now the children in the story become proactive and spreading words of kindness, how does this help with their courage, maybe, to start fending off things like cyberbullying?
Well, I think that, when kids learn about the power of kindness, that even a simple gesture can impact others so much. a kind word, a kind encouraging comment, when a peer is feeling down, or something is stressing a friend out. Those small things can mean so much. And if more people were kind to each other, I think things like bullying would be less commonplace. If the bully is shown kindness and feels better about themselves, then most likely they're not going to engage in acts of bullying. So I think that there's a ripple effect with acts of kindness. And, it's sort of like, I don't know if some of our listeners and viewers have heard of the kindness boomerang. But what that concept is that when, like a boomerang, you throw it and it comes back, you send out a kind gesture, and later on it will come back to you in some form. So it's kind of like pay it forward kind of concept. So if you're standing in line at the grocery store and you decide to pay for the person in front of you's groceries, maybe a couple weeks later, someone will do something kind for you. So it's just a matter of, teaching our kids the importance of kindness, and how even any age can do something kind for someone else. Even a smile can be a kind gesture. I think that really promotes an environment of acceptance and inclusion, which is so important in this day and age.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, we've covered a lot of ground tonight. In one small 32-page book, we've covered a plethora of emotional feelings, and we've circled back to almost something that, what the Zebra Press is: be the good news in someone's life. And what final words would you add to what we've, in addition to what we've gone through today, to our viewers?
Well, I think that, social emotional skills are so important for kids. And that's why I decided to focus on that as an author, as a children's book author. So I also have another book forthcoming in about a month. It's in production right now. It's also a book about social emotional skills. It's a Halloween themed book. And I just feel that it's so important for kids to learn social emotional skills. Sometimes, they don't learn it in school, but that's something parents can teach. That's something that parents can easily teach. And children's books, there's workbooks that you can get about that topic. But teaching kids the basics of social emotional skills, I think, is so important as they get older. And so they can, relate well with their peers, make friends, succeed socially. It's just incredibly important. So that's why I feel that focusing on that in children's literature, there need to be more books about social emotional skills.
Couldn't agree more. And, maybe we can even write some for senior adults. They seem to forget as they get older.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, well, Rebecca, it's been wonderful having you on. Great discussion, great message. And again, Rebecca Greene's Explore Virginia with Me. It's a terrific book. Her first book was wonderful. I'm sure her third book is equally as wonderful. And we'll have her back after that one and the one from Halloween are out there. We'll discuss both of those at the same time. So, Rebecca, thank you for coming on. It was a great show.
Thank you so much, Ralph. And thank you, viewers and listeners, for joining us tonight.
Great show. I loved how, as you said, you were able to cover so much ground geographically and emotionally, conceptually.
Yeah.
So I think it was a wonderful show tonight. Good job, Ralph.
Yeah, there's a lot of themes packed into that little book, and I wanted to make sure we got at least some of the tough ones out there. Teens today are living in a much different environment than when most of us grew up, and it's really hard for them. And that segues right into our author 2 weeks from today, Katherine Goodwin Tone. She wrote historical fiction. The audience is teen readers. And it's about a young boy who's not quite a teenager fighting in the middle of the American Revolution. And think about that in today's context, how difficult that must have been. Again, so we'll have Katherine Goodwin Tone on in 2 weeks with The King's Broad Arrow. So look forward to that one as well.
Yeah, that sounds powerful. I am looking forward to it. So until then, guys, be the good news in someone's life.